This is the Leadership Podcast, and we study leaders. This is episode 475, featuring Nicola Ilic, founder of Changelab and adjunct professor of leadership at Georgetown University. Thank you for joining us today. This is Jim Vasilopoulos, founder of Rafty Advisors, and this is the Leadership Podcast.
Hey everybody, Jan Rutherford here, founder of Self-Reliant Leadership. Thanks for making us part of your day as we study leaders. And you can find everything about us, our guests, our past episodes at theleadershippodcast.com.
And you can also find our episodes now on YouTube. We have a YouTube channel. Go to theleadershippodcast.com to find that. And one of the other things you'll find is information about our sponsor, Darley. Wonderful people there. Their mission supports all our military and first responders with the equipment they need to ensure mission success, whether it's a water pump, a drone, or emergency medical supplies. Learn more about this fantastic company and the people supporting our nation's heroes at darley.com. That's DARLEY.com. Darley, you serve others, we serve you.
Thanks, Jim. Hey, and our guest today is Nicola Ilic. And a lot of times, not sure everybody knows this. The way we get our guests is we find interesting people and we invite them. That's the main way. Every once in a while, some PR firm will pitch somebody and we might choose them. That doesn't usually happen. And what's really rare is someone reaches out to us directly and establishes a relationship. And then we find them really interesting and we invite them on the podcast. And that's what happened here. And Nicola is a professor at Georgetown, a social entrepreneur, an activist. He co-founded Serbia on the Move and has led grassroots pro-democracy campaigns. He's the founder of Changelab. He advises social movements and teaches his democratic leadership framework at Georgetown. Nicola, welcome to the Leadership Podcast.
Thank you so much. It's great to be here. I'm looking forward to our conversation.
We are too. And what's not in the public bio? You know, you're pretty out there on the internet, but what's something that people wouldn't find out about you very easily?
I used to play basketball. When between 16 and 20, I played some, let's say, more serious basketball in Serbia. I was a point guard. I'm 6'2", 6'3". I'm not sure if 190 centimeters, which will make me quite short on the court because you're but in life, I'm considered tall. And where I'm from in Serbia, I'm considered average.
Yeah.
Yeah, basketball and sports is a huge part of my life. It taught me a lot about individual excellence, work ethics, and team play. What does it take to sacrifice sometimes self for team?
I'm thinking back, Jim. We've had more people that had something to do with basketball that became business people and entrepreneurs than I think any other sport. I mean, we've had a lot of musicians on, but the sport that seems like people have a connection to is basketball more than football or baseball or lacrosse or hockey.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I'm trying to think about that. Maybe you're right. I'm not sure. I gotta wreck my mind, but it's, either soccer or basketball, because those are the two kind of international sports now. I think they've just gone. And I remember as a young kid going to Greece once, and everyone all of a sudden is like the basketball fever just hit Europe, and I was in the middle of it, and I think it was maybe at the beginning of like Jordan's run at the beginning, and it just seemed like basketball was like the sport to play in Europe, and I was just shocked because like the trip before it was soccer.
Yeah, we have a Serbian basketball player here in Denver. You might have heard of him.
Yeah, Nicola Ilic. That's right.
Yeah, I remember being in Australia last year, and I was surprised at how popular the NBA was there. It's crazy. Well, sports does definitely connect us, and we actually, the last episode was somebody talking about their role at, interviewing people on the sidelines and working at ESPN. It's fascinating. Let me ask you, let me kind of get into the leadership stuff. Your work centers around democratic leadership.
Right.
How do you define it? What makes it fundamentally different from other leadership models?
Yeah, that's a good place to start. Well, maybe I can start with a little story. How I started thinking about this. Not only that I noticed that in many social movements or pro-democracy movements, political parties, I noticed that sometimes people don't act very democratically. They don't include others. So I was like, okay, what is this all about? But then, especially when I became a father about 5 years ago, I have two little daughters, Mila and Sophia. They're 4 and 5. And I started reading a lot about human development from that age. And it's amazing how much you can learn from your kids, right? Because they reflect back to you immediately your behavior. But also you see a personal development accelerated because it's so fast in these first few years. And then also I read a lot of books. And one thing I noticed is that whenever kids at that age especially experience any kind of anxiety, some kind of uncertainty, your kid goes into a park and something happens that they don't like, makes them cry, whatever, they have learned behavior of looking for the authority to protect them, to give them some direction and restore the order. So they go find a mommy, daddy, a nanny, whoever is the trusted authority. And this is good. This is because, it preserves them from harm. But at the same time, as a good parent, you learn that your job is also to teach them to become self-reliant. Go back to your concept, self-reliant leadership. You need to teach them how to build agency and that they don't have to rely on you all the time. And another thing I noticed is when the first time I taught my daughter Mila to write her shoelaces, if I even tried to do it for her after that again, she would be upset. Like, I know how to do that. She would push back. I know how to do it. I know how to put my jacket on. So once acquired self-reliant skill is now there and it's part of identity, it's part of pride. But I also noticed that while we develop this dependency on authority to protect us when we're young, if you don't fully unlearn it as an adult, in the face of uncertainty and anxiety, especially if uncertainty is very high, think about something, death of a loved one or some big crisis, not only losing job, but maybe a war or some kind of economic crisis, something big. You might go back, and many people do, to that necessity to find mother or father figure to depend on. And suddenly, it became very clear to me why through history, authoritarians are always also fear mongers. Why? Because if you create enemy and fear and danger, you will raise the threshold for uncertainty, therefore also anxiety in the society. Many people who can't handle that level of anxiety will surface searching for that one who is their mother, father figure, authority leader who's going to say, I will solve everything for you. But there's also, you can teach the opposite. You can teach the agency. Hopefully it starts when you're young, but it's not just you have agency, you don't have agency. It's about how much uncertainty and anxiety can you stomach in order to still, preserve self-agency or self-reliance without creating that change.
I'm trying to tie this to the business world, because we know there's a lot of uncertainty. We know leaders, keep using the word change and transformation instead of the word adaptability, because change and transformation signal there's a beginning and an end, and there isn't. It's always going to be, you've got to be adaptive, but they're not fear mongering, but they're also not creating agency with people because they're not empowering them, in my opinion. I mean, one of the worst skills of leaders in the business world right now is the ability to delegate and the ability to develop successors. It just doesn't happen. So I'm curious, how do you think what you just said, how do you think that relates to the business world? What lesson can we take, to make our companies, our teams, our organizations better?
Yeah. Well, actually, to go back to your previous question, and that's answering this question as well, the core of democratic leadership is how do you relate to uncertainty? And I give example of autocracy as like the most maybe obvious example of this, but actually you have this micro-authoritarian behavior everywhere. It doesn't have to, I'm not talking about politics anymore. I'm talking about office. We all have experience. It doesn't have to be tensional or malevolent even. It can come with the great, intentions of helping people and so forth. when it comes to the business world, fear mongering is strategy that autocrats use, but it can also be just a change that someone who has power and authority, a title, is handling and decides that they're the only person who can handle this. And they kind of try to shield their team from making tough choices. So when you talked about change and adaptability, maybe another way to think about it is that people are not as afraid of change as much as they're afraid of the losses that change can bring. And you don't know, right? Hey, we have a new CEO. Hey, we lost 3 big accounts. Hey, we have a new competitor in the market, whatever the change is. And immediately, we're like, oh, what does that mean? Am I going to lose my job? Am I going to change position? Do I have to move to a new city? Am I going to whatever? And you have new tasks. Is my promotion now still there? Or do I have to prove myself to the new director? So you're like scared. And that's uncertainty. And then the question becomes, as someone who is leading your team, how would you enable your team to handle that uncertainty with agency so they can do something like, okay, I can handle this, instead of going back to you, or sometimes driven by fear and the worst case scenario, make bad decisions. But we can go even into like more practical ways of how do you build agency. But at the core of this idea of democratic leadership is, how do you enable people to exercise leadership in the face of uncertainty, no matter what is their title?
Right.
How do you create interdependencies?
Everything you're kind of saying is, it connects to everything we talk about in, let's say, management consulting. Say, hey, how can we delegate more appropriately? How can we let people make mistakes and learn from them so they become independent? And, all these things that we learn, as parents, as you suggested earlier, to help our employees, build a stronger, more cohesive team. You've helped a lot of people develop these types of programs where they go in and they say like, hey, let's transform the organization. But there's a difference between, let's say, here's what you should do, here's what you shouldn't do, and here's how we help you, like, not just comprehend it, but to transform yourself so that now you actually live it and operate in that mode. And I think that's the real thing, because I think there are countless books we can read to say like, okay, I comprehend the idea, but like, we got to connect the comprehension to the actual transformation. And so tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah. I mean, leadership requires a whole different type of learning, right? It's tacit learning. It's more close to how you learn how to walk or ride a bike or play tennis or whatever it is. You have to be immersed in experience, and that's your biggest teacher, right? So transformation has to happen through action and experience, and then making sense of that action experience. So whenever I am working with some, a team or organization, whatever it is, whoever seeks my support, first thing is you want to analyze a little bit, like, well, what are you trying to achieve? What are your main challenges? Different organizations have different challenges, right? Very often we come to two most common ones are delegation, which is more of a question of how do you find the fine balance between providing some direction that you're paid for as a boss while creating some space for people to also do their own thing. And the second one is how to build trust. Those are most common. But I think, the key is, and you don't have to be a training expert, a leadership development expert. You can be just someone who leads a team, or, is a teacher or has kids. The key is to enable people to have meaningful experiences. I remember when my first boss allowed me to do a presentation. I was in my early 20s. I was working for this financial company, because I also studied finances back in the day. And he gave me a chance to present in front of 40 CEOs our new product. I was so scared. It was not perfect presentation, but I was not the same person after that, because it was whole new experience for me. And then okay, I could do it. I can do this. I knew it wasn't perfect. I knew there were good sides. But like, I built my self-esteem. That experience was more leadership development than if I read a book on leadership.
I'm kind of curious because, it seems like everyone we've spoken to on this podcast that's had success has had people that invested time in them And we know that the most successful kids are the ones who have parents who invest time with them when they're in those formative years, in those really young, early years where people invest time in them and sit on the floor and play with them and really talk about curiosity and share that experience with them. And, what occurs to me is we can have all the best ideas in the world, but we have to have time to impact people, like to impact and teach people. And, the amount of training programs that are out there in companies that are formalized and big where we invest in people is diminished greatly, especially for young workers entering the workforce. And the amount of first reports that people have is like way more than what it used to be when you used to have like 3 to 5 first direct reports. Now you might have 20 or more. Is part of what we need to do to give this kind of, I wouldn't say it's like paternal or maternal, but this kind of mentoring kind of relationship where we help people have the experiential learning you were talking about. Like we need to have probably smaller team sizes and we need to have more time to spend with people to have that kind of relationship. I don't know. What do you think?
Team size wise, it depends. It depends what you're trying to achieve. But I would say, and going back to the kids, you don't have to spend that much. Like it's good if you spend time with kids, but I don't think you have to spend that much time. Actually, it might be even detrimental if you spend too much time with them. I would say you have to enable them to have experiences, like go and play with your peers. Remember, this is what my kids might miss, but I grew up in Serbia, especially between when I was 5 and 12, 13, we were roaming bands of kids around having adventures. There was no grown-ups around us. We learned through many screw-ups. We were a pack of kids that were like 5, 6 years apart. So we had some, if someone is 5 years older than you are, that's grown up for you as far as, they learn how to take care of you. You learn how to respect them a little bit. You learn from each other. I think management style, that it's more about, hey, try this. Here's a space. Screw up. That's fine. Come back and let's debrief what happened. You don't want to one thing is to have experience. The other thing is to have experience with reflection, because reflection that catches the learning. Even if something goes well, people forget to reflect on if something went well, why did it go well? So you don't become a one-hit wonder. But another thing, the last thing I want to see on this is, I think it's less about amount of time. It's more about how you spend time. I know some of my friends who spend a lot of time with kids, they're on their phones, or like they're not really paying attention, they're just there. But if you're really there for like 20, like every morning I wake up, usually my older daughter Millie is already in our bed because she wants to come in the morning. She wants to talk for 5-10 minutes. These 5-10 minutes in the morning are the most precious 5-10 minutes we have throughout the day. We're focused on each other. She asks me weird questions about life, about nature, about all kind of stuff. Sometimes it's 15 minutes, but I'm there, she's there. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it's going back to the people leading teams and CEOs. It's really about relationship building, getting to know people and be really present. Quality or quantity. And then
I really like what you said about reflection. I think that's important. And as a boss, maybe to interject and make sure you have that reflection. But I'm thinking back to kind of my childhood, which is probably a lot like yours, but in a different part of the world. Our roaming band of kids, I never reflected on anything because I had consequences. Like if you said the wrong thing to the kid 5 years older than you, your face was in the dirt. You had consequences, and that forced reflection. You understood how if you built a team that was too stacked on one side or the other team just quit and took their ball and went home. And then you didn't have anyone to play against, and you learned because you had immediate consequences and feedback. So maybe the role is we kind of morph this model that we say, this is a great model to learn, where you have this experiential learning. What we need to do is to force the reflection to prevent maybe the consequential learning, which is something we just, I think, naturally adapt to as kids growing up.
I think consequences are fine. They're very important. And if you screw up and lose money and maybe will decrease your salary, that's part of consequence. And then let's reflect on all of that. Like, I think consequences are very important. Hopefully, you want to protect people from some ultimate big consequences that will impact not only them, or maybe them beyond repair, but also others. I would say, but reflection is important. Whatever goes on, we had this meeting, we had this campaign, we had this whatever it is event. How was it for you? Bosses usually like to have the first word. I would never suggest that. Have the last one, because you already have authority. Whatever you say is going to contaminate the space, because now people will need to align, or more or less, with what you think. And there are two powerful questions I like to ask, and this is of reflexive questions. When someone comes to you with a problem or challenge, and this I do this to my kids, I do this to my students, I do this everywhere. I ask my favorite question: what do you think? And tell me more. These are two most powerful questions. And then they start learning. And I have a story around it, but I'm going to stop here because I know
Yeah.
that
Well,
question.
I wanted to draw in some current events, if you will. McKinsey put out an article, I think today,
Mhm.
about how cultures, if not by design, they're by default. And
Yeah.
the Wall Street Journal had an article in the past week that CEOs are getting mean, basically. They've got the upper hand now, the employees don't. And so Jim and I, what we're observing with our clients is there's a lot of people on the hamster wheel, do more, better, faster. And, people aren't engaged. We know that from the Gallup survey. I'm wondering what you think leaders need to do these days to course correct. Because if you're, from a democratic leadership perspective, you're thinking big picture, you're thinking long term, you're taking a step back to reflect. The way the business world is working now, at least my perspective is it's more short-term focus than it's ever been. And
Mm.
part of the excuse is, well, there's so much uncertainty, I can't plan for anything. So I'm not going to plan, I'm just going to react all day long, and I'll do stupid things like cut off my nose to spite my face. I mean, that's again, I'm just being real blunt and candid. Jim's nodding because I think he agrees with me. Nicola, what do you think what do we need to do? Well, how do we get back to where people are empowered and they have agency and they're dealing, collectively dealing with this uncertainty?
Yeah. I mean, it depends, right? On the different reasons why people do this, why they go to this reactive stance. If you talk to anyone who built a successful business, they'll always tell you it's about playing a long game. Because who cares about short term if it's going to be wiped out long term, right? It's very hard for me to answer this question when it's like when I do coaching or consulting and someone asks me on the list, I would ask, well, what is what's behind that? What do you think? But I think that it's an easy trap to fall in, to think that you as someone who is person with a title and authority and power, that makes you a leader. It doesn't. It just makes you a person with a title and authority.
Yeah.
I like to use this metaphor of, if you see a person with a knife, what do you say? Oh, here's a chef. Or do you say, oh, here's a murderer? Well, it depends what they do with the knife. It's the same with power, authority, and title. Like, you're not a leader just because you have that. That's a tool. What you're going to do with it? What are your intentions? What I'm trying to say here is that companies today dealing with uncertainty, the only way, and ever accelerating uncertainty, the only way to actually deal with it, you don't have to plan. That's right. It's hard to plan, maybe. I think you still can plan, but you have to enable all the talents. That's your task as a leader.
Yeah.
Because to meet complex, adaptive, and systemic challenges, you need all the brains you can get.
You just made me think of something. Let me bounce this off you. In manufacturing and construction sites, anywhere where there's people working with their hands, people all know they have the ability to hit the red button to stop everything. Everybody knows that there's a red button and you hit that and everything stops because goal one is to be safe. There isn't a red button in the white collar world to basically stop. Just stop and take a step back and go, this is broke. This isn't working. We're at risk here. I wonder if there should be a red button.
That's a good one. It's interesting, especially now that everybody's thinking about potentially going, the economy is in crisis, global and US, and everybody's started to cut trainings at coaching.
Yeah.
which is the worst thing because you're about to meet the uncertainty. You need to hit that button. I feel that button is where, let me talk to a coach.
Yeah.
Like the spaces or the leadership programs or the workshops that Changelab and I create are all about slowing down.
Yeah.
And always using yourself and your work as a case. We don't use like, let me tell you about IBM 70 years ago. No, or 3 years ago. No, it's like you right now. And it's amazing how, like, I just received an email today from this person on coaching at UNICEF, how much our coaching, we had 2 sessions only,
Yeah.
changed completely the way she works. That was 2 hours of her life. That was a few $100, a bit more invested. And things have changed dramatically. So I think that's the mistake. That they cut the most important thing when you face the uncertainty, which is good quality training and coaching.
Yeah.
Because,
Oh, I appreciate that. Reminder to our audience, we're enjoying this conversation with Nicola because we have a great sponsor by the name of Darley, who are based in America's Midwest. The wonderful people and great company do work for our first responders, law enforcement, military around the globe. Learn more about this fantastic company at darley.com. That's DARLEY.com.
Yeah, I love this topic. This is kind of like actually the question I was most interested in going into this podcast, because, when we develop as individuals, anyone listening to this is probably like, an individual developing themselves. And many times we're asked to coach individuals or work with individuals. But, democracy and democratic leadership, I think is a concept that is so interesting because a pure democracy is essentially majority rules. Okay. Pure democracy is, hey, we took a vote, 51% of the people believe this or that, and businesses would have a hard time functioning in that mode. At the same time, businesses, I think in the last at least 10 years have gotten to a point where we let the tail wag the dog a lot. Like, we will let like 1 or 2 things happen and it's like, oh my gosh, that's going to upset everything else in the business. And especially with a lot of HR issues. And I'm not saying that's right or wrong. I'm just saying like it's the antithesis of what you would consider pure democratic principles. And I know part of what you're getting at with this, and I just want you to clarify this because I think this is important, is that what you're trying to do is say, like, how do we get stuff away from the individual and to the collective? And the to benefit the collective, or the understanding of responsibility everyone has for the common mission. Help us understand kind of that conflict between the way we sometimes misinterpret democratic principles or democracy, and how it affects positively and negatively our business environment.
Yeah, that's a good question. Look, you can think about countries as a companies, and they compete. And the history taught us that for some reason, democracies outcompete everybody else in way of life, in economy, and everything. And then when the question is like, well, why? Very simple reason. It's not voting. Voting is not democracy. Voting is just a part of democracy, right? Is the ability to surface various ideas, let them compete, and then come up with the best one. That's the power of democracy, because you are allowed to disagree, and then you have free market of ideas, and then co-creation happens. Oh, wait, your idea, well, what about? And then you put it together, and then this new idea, super idea, competes against some other super idea, and then we have all these super idea, right? But that also creates so many incentives for people to participate, which means that one problem is solved not by one person who thinks they are the best authoritarian, right? They know everything, but by billions or millions or thousands at least, who compete these ideas to solve that one problem. You can do the same in organization. It's not about voting. Forget voting. Not voting. It's about how do you facilitate process of co-creation? How do you facilitate a market of ideas in your company? Because the fact that you're a CEO, maybe you've been in your company for 30, 40 years, you earned it, of course. Maybe there's like new Nikola Tesla sitting in your, as an intern. Like you don't know who are like in those new. Maybe there's a new Elon Musk sitting somewhere in mid management. Like there's so many talent that's untapped. Because if you structure organization like or more similar to what military is structured, top down, you just won't surface all these potential talents. What you want as an entrepreneur, as a business owner, you want the best idea so that you can serve your clients or customers the best way. Well, the best idea doesn't come from the highest position, because guess what? If I just make you CEO, you're not suddenly smarter. You just have that position. Maybe you're already smart, but guess what? There's probably 3, 4 others who could do your job, and they don't have your position just because there can only be one gym CEO, for example, right? Why not utilize the other 3 as well? That's what I'm talking about. How would you create a system in which you enable people to reach the heights of their potential through experiences, through through trainings and so forth, but then also allow for space for these ideas, as many ideas to compete. I mean, there are companies who already work in similar ways. Most of the tech companies, like Google does that quite a bit, quite a bit. And everybody's trying to learn more and more. How do you, people are talking about, oh, we need self-starting, creative, innovative workforce, motivated. Well, all of these things are dependable on your emotion. This is emotional work. Everything I just said is emotional work, right? Creativity, innovation, but yet you create environment in which either emotion is erased, unwelcomed, unprofessional, or where inspiration has to come from a single person. Well, that doesn't work. You're contradicting yourself. I've sit in the business classrooms at Harvard Business School and so forth. Well, I've heard contradicting messages by people in suit and ties who look nothing close to any inspiration or motivational, telling me how I should be inspired and motivated without any inspiration, motivation in their voice or their ideas, and telling me that at the same time I have to impose my vision of everybody else. Well, how are they going to be motivated if I'm imposing? You see what I mean? Like there's so much contradiction.
Oh yeah, I mean, I really love it, and I think we're really having a discussion on merit. And it's almost like a meritocracy in many ways that I think is really powerful. And I know I've been the happiest as an employee and as a leader in meritocracies. I have not been happy when I was working in a company that was very political and it wasn't a meritocracy. But I want to do like the SAT comparison. So let's say if we do like company to company, country to country, competition, at the end of the day, country, company, whatever it is, the vote happens with dollars. Okay. Where do consumers spend their money? Consumers spend their money. That's how the best ideas percolate to the top and win. Okay. Fantastic. Within a company, the competition of ideas, which I love, I think is great, has to end up being based on merit. And we usually don't have enough time to have 4 ideas percolate, bring them to the market, let the consumer cast their vote to see which idea was the best. We typically have to have some internal arbiter of merit within there to say, we believe this is the idea. Is that really the crux of like how we manage that decision-making process within an organization to ensure that the right ideas get chosen and recognized so that we can move forward? I mean, I think that how you manage that arbitration of merit is, I think, the most complicated issue, and that's the most fraught with potential to be corrupted, I would say.
Yeah. I think there are 2 things here. One is how to make decisions, and the other one is how do you surface ideas. Let's get to like very tactical level. To be an effective democratic leader, you need to have ability to be extremely present, so focus. Once you're present, you can start paying attention to what's happening in the room. You have to learn how to read the room. This is all the things, everything I'm telling you now, this is what I'm teaching, right? Once you know how to read the room, you'll start learning. And also you have to have a mindset that you differentiate initiative and extroversion from leadership. They're not the same. We're all primed from elementary school and so forth. They're like, who has the quickest hand up? Oh, that's the intelligence. No, this is or, initiative is leadership. We all been victims of a bad idea. Or like extroversion. Oh, look at that person. He talks or they talk a lot. She talks a lot. Like, well, we also know that person who doesn't say much when they say it. That's it. So effective democratic leaders know all of this, and they know how to put it to practice, and they pay attention, and they see the room, and they already met their team workers one-on-one, build relationships with them. They understand different personalities they deal with. And they know that Sarah there doesn't say much. She's a bit shy. She has different personality. When I say personality, I'm using personality as psychological big five, right? She's maybe more introverted. So I need to maybe call on her. And then you call on her, and then she has an amazing idea that would not surface otherwise. And you know that, I don't know, Serene here, she talks a lot, and maybe you need to manage that. And so you see what I mean? And so this is already exercising democratic leadership, like how you're enabling your group to start surfacing ideas, and you're like a conductor in the orchestra, right?
Yeah. Well, you got to have a lot of self-confidence to let that bubble up. And we're going to have a guest on again for the second time, Margaret Heffernan, who is pretty famous for being a great leader of creative people, where you can let those ideas bubble up. A lot of people that we've worked with in the past are people that would not be comfortable with the chaos. But let me ask you about young people, Nicola. You're shaping the next generation of leaders. What patterns or traits are you seeing with these emerging leaders that give you hope or concern?
I noticed three things. One is that it seems, especially in because I work with people from all over the world, from developed, underdeveloped countries. I work with many activists, people who grew up with nothing, people who grew up with everything. I noticed that people who grew up in well-protected childhoods with not enough challenges underdevelop their ability to handle uncertainty. And there's more and more of that. So a little event will create enough anxiety for them that they're paralyzed. So that's one thing I'm noticing. And this is important to understand. We all want our kids not to have any challenges. We don't want kids to go through like what I went through, like or my generation in Serbia and Bosnia, Croatia, and the war and all of that. So challenges are developmental, and there are these circumstantial challenges that you don't choose; just they happen to you, right? Life brings them to them. But then orderly society reduce these type of circumstantial challenges, which means that parents and the environment has to create challenges otherwise, and I don't think we're good at that. So I see. So see what I mean? So that's something. So when I talk about education, I am teaching master students. I think we need to think about how do we educate kids even before that to challenge them properly, because environment maybe doesn't provide enough developmental challenges. But that's what I'm noticing: lack of ability to meet uncertainty. The second thing is that everybody's looking for purpose, and they're not just going to do work and hate it, but it's a paycheck. And many people are lost, and that's fine, but universities are not equipped to deal with them. My class addresses a lot of who you are becoming, where you're going, and why, identity stuff. And most of my students tell me like that's one of the most valuable things for them, because that's exactly why they went to grad school, and all they get is most technical stuff. And the last thing is that many of them have this feel that there's something deeper that we need to change. They're not sure what.
Well, let me ask you this. I mean, if this was the basis of what I talked about in my TED Talk a little bit, was, we get crucibles that are thrown at us. You were in a war. You were, I mean, there's disasters, there's layoffs from jobs, there's getting fired. I mean, there's all kinds of things that, can cause trauma and adversity, or a severe test, if you will. What do you say about it? Creating your own severe test. Who was it that wrote Authentic Leadership? Bill George from, basically said, when they did the research of 1,000 leaders, the only thing that they figured out was a successful leader was constantly testing themselves and reframing their life story. So are you saying to these students, these young people, you have to test yourself?
Yes.
If things aren't hard, go do hard stuff. Is that what you're saying?
Exactly. I'm saying that you have to try to do something that's really difficult. Let me give you an example. In my last class, I had a student from Afghanistan, from Burkina Faso,
Oh,
uh,
jeez.
and then some other less Westerners, Europeans and Americans. And there was quite a difference in the way of thinking and experience. Be- I'm not glorifying the way people live in Afghanistan or the challenges that someone had to go through Burkina Faso. Because there are many stories that we never heard of people who never made it to my class, especially to Georgetown somehow. But those who did, man, they have some learning some stuff that's so amazing. They have tremendous life experience, and they want and they wonder, okay, how do we enable people who don't have to go through war or some kind of a thing that they might not make it out alive to develop? And if you and exactly right, Jan, every person who achieves something great, when you ask them what's behind us, like I keep challenging myself. I tell them, I ask them, what is the highest good you can imagine? What is the craziest dream? That's usually how I start, because also do some coaching. I ask folks first who you are to anchor them in, just who you are, where you've been, what is your story, and then the next question is where you're going. And then usually they're modest, and I push them like, well, no, like what is something that you dream about? And then they come up with something like this lady recently told me, oh, I want to open a school for kids in my country, and for her that's like that's like a lot of money and a lot of work. It's not easy. It's like a big dream, big bold dream. And then I said, okay, well, why don't you why don't you aim for that? Because when you aim for something that's huge, big, and I see it as a challenging, but you'll see it as your dream. As Nietzsche said, he or she who knows why to live can bear anyhow. If you know, if you're doing something that you believe in, challenges will feel very differently. You'll have so much emotional capacity to meet the uncertainty and challenges that you need to meet on that path. Versus if you're doing something that's meaningless, sometimes even a Excel sheet that has no meaning can be such an obstacle to start working on. That's why you procrastinate. Like, oh, I can't even begin because I see no purpose in this. Yet people do ridiculously difficult things, and if you talk to them, and I talk to many people who did crazy stuff, they always tell you that they saw no other way because their moral compass and their purpose was directing through that challenge, and they were ready to meet it.
Yeah, I really like that. And we probably didn't touch enough on that moral compass through our discussion today of, what are the things that you actually change? What are the things that you actually don't change? And I know you're a big fan of social change. And so, maybe you can share a story of, something that got you to understand the power of it and the limits of it as well. I think that might be interesting.
Yeah, as I said, I grew up in Serbia. At the time was the country was called Yugoslavia, and in the 90s, when I was about 8, I experienced the shift from very safe and careless childhood to suddenly I couldn't go to visit my family in Boston, Croatia. My family members became refugees, war, and all of that. And I was confused and scared as a kid. Like, what is going on? How did this happen? Because at that age, you think grown-ups know. And then you realize that grown-ups don't know, many of them. That's a big break. And I was confused for some time until I learned about this social movement at the time that was fighting against the dictatorship that was causing most of these things. And I joined, and I found two things. One, I found community. It's just so much fun to work together on something that matters to so many people. We did crazy stuff. We were chased by police and all of that. And, and again, I was just a kid protesting and doing, posters and stuff. We were part of the bigger movement. But that movement led to the demise of the dictatorship that literally brought him down. And that movement is studied now everywhere. The Otpor, the resistance movement. And they became friends with the founder. He's a good friend of mine now. So Popovic, at the time, he was just someone I admired. And the second thing I found there is inspiration. I was like, wait, we can, in retrospect, not at that time, it took me some time to capture this. Like, you can, and we were also, I was like, at the time, 15, 16, and everybody else was like 20, 25 the most, right? The kids. Like, wait, we as kids can organize and use nonviolence to overthrow the worst dictator in Europe? Like, what else is possible? What's next? Wait, and what is the key? Train people, give them tools, and enable them to act. And I became forever hooked on that idea. And that's what we've done later with that organization, Serbia on the Move. We train people all the time, training, teach them a basis of how do you lead a team? How do you build trust? How do you strategize? Go now and do it. Screw up, come back, let's learn. Succeed, come back, let's learn. Here's new, teach people how to have ideas and become accountable for these ideas and teach people to have bias to action. Everything you think about a good startup is true for social change, right? You want to learn through experience. You want to fail small and fast, learn, adjust, keep going. And if you scale that, social movements are that, like startups, times 1,000. If you do that with 1,000 people who keep trying, failing, fast, learning, trying, suddenly you change the whole country.
To me, what you're saying is your circle of influence is bigger than you think, potentially.
Can you see that in a different way, please?
That, I would say we control two things: where we spend our time and how we respond to our environment. When it comes to other people, we can maybe influence them. We can't control them. But sometimes we think, well, we can only influence the people around us. I can't fight City Hall type of thing. What I'm hearing you say is, collectively, our circle of influence, our ability to influence events and things is way bigger than we think. And again, going back to the people listening to this show, is a lot of people listening to this show are in companies and cultures that they probably aren't really great thinking are great. And, we've said over and over, there's three things you can do. You can suck it up, you can try to change it, or you can move on. And, we're always advocating for, you can change it. And I think that's, to me, is that your closing thought to our listeners, or do you have something else? I don't want to put.
Oh, that's good. I like that. I like to say that I am creating whatever, if I teach my class at Georgetown or work with some activists or with the corporate world or with the governments, I like to say I actually create activists in unlikely places, because invitation to our listeners is, if you want to change something in your organization, you can, but you have to think about it as a little activist project. Very commonly, mistake by people is that, oh, I see something is wrong, and now I'm going to go in and just say it in the meeting. And they think that's active leadership. It might be, but maybe it's also heroic death. Maybe you don't have authority to say it. So what I'm inviting people to think about is, how do you approach change in a strategic way? Go and talk to the way you build a social movement is what you can do literally to change something in your organization. Go talk to, you always start with the core. Go talk to a few trusted colleagues to check in with them. What are they observing? Maybe you're wrong. Maybe you're right. And then maybe you gain a few allies. And then maybe you talk to a few other people. And then maybe next time, there's a meeting in 2 weeks, and there's going to be 7 people in this meeting, and maybe these 3 people might be receptive to your message. Go do one-on-ones with them. Like, prepare, and then your intervention in the meeting will be a whole different level, because people are not surprised. At least 3 of them are on your side. You already tested. You see what I mean?
Just
So if you approach change,
politics. I mean,
yeah,
that's what you used to call it.
yes. I have a newsletter, Pulse of Change, and one of the most successful edition was about office politics. I said, hey, why could people always fail in office politics? Because they don't play it, it plays them. There's always politics, not because people are this or that, because when you have a group of people, you need to organize, There's going to be politics. There's going to be power, authority, and relationship and trust dynamics and struggle. If you can make it toxic, you can make it positive. As someone you said at the beginning, someone young, I think it was you. The culture, that culture either is created by itself or you are mindful about it. So yeah, office politics is just part of the culture, and if you don't play it, then there's no change. You can just complain, or you can make your interventions. Hey, I noticed this. Here's the shiny truth from me, who is now on ethical high ground, and the only thing that changes is that people don't listen to you because the easiest thing to do is to kill the messenger. Figuratively speaking, right?
Seen it dozens of times. This has been a fantastic conversation, Nicola. Thank you for sharing your insights. There's so much more I'm sure we could get into, and but thank you for joining us today.
Thank you so much. I had a lot of fun talking to both of you. Thank you for having me on.
Yeah, you're a great thinker. We'll have ways for you to connect with Nicola in our show notes for our listeners out there. So make sure to visit us at theleadershippodcast.com. And remember, this is an interesting one. You got to really think carefully about this one.
Yeah.
Only the wisest and stupidest of men never change. Confucius. It's a wrap.
Thanks for listening to the Leadership Podcast. To listen to more shows or to access the books and content discussed on this show, be sure to visit theleadershippodcast.com. The material in this podcast is copyright by Rafti Advisors and Self-Reliant Leadership and must have written approval before commercial application.